obviously. You're going to have to be ready.
Hello everybody. Welcome to, I see normally I would say welcome to the whatever Ignite, and actually now I can't remember how many, I presume it's 40. But,
41!
It's 41, 41, see, I get it wrong, it's because I was just focused on the whole birthday thing. So, who knows where they were exactly 10 years ago right now?
I do.
There's some people who were at the first Ignite, which was up at the Art Design Academy up on the hill. And I wasn't the first person on stage for the first ever Ignite. That was Mr. Mike Nolan, who's joined us today, in case I'm shit, and then he'll be able to just rush on and actually do a good comparing job. And then I gave the first ever Ignite Liverpool talk, which is on YouTube and has been shared recently, but do not watch it. or if you're worried about, because yeah, we're always looking for new speakers, and if you're wanting to give a talk, you should definitely give an Ignite talk. And if you're worried that you're not going to be good enough, go and watch like my first talk, and then you'll be like, oh, this is fine. Anyway, if you haven't been before, what have you been doing for the past 10 years? But basically what we do is we've got 9 speakers plus karaoke, which I'll get to in a second, this evening. It's going to be split into 2 halves. We're going to have 5 talks, then there'll be a break of half an hour or so you can get another drink, chat to the person next to you and find out what they thought about the first half. Think about what you might want to talk about at a future Ignite. And actually, importantly, if you've got a thing that actually, I'll get to that in a minute. And then the second half, 4 more talks, and then Ignite karaoke. Each talk is 20 slides. Each slide is shown for 15 seconds. The speakers have no control over this, so their talk will take 5 minutes, whether they want it to or not. And almost everybody, actually, I think everyone has spoken in a past one. It's all like kind of, old hands who are just going to be great at this. Just to pass some pressure on them. So yeah, the talks will be 5 minutes. As you can see from the programme, it's a really varied and interesting kind of set of talks we've got, as always. The Ignite karaoke at the end is Neil, who does all of the hard work in between. I just stand on stage every 3 months. Neil does all the kind of tweeting, chasing people for speakers, all that kind of stuff in between. He's pulled together 20 slides from previous Ignite Liverpool talks, but not all the same talk, and compiled them into a new special sort of random Ignite presentation. And so we want somebody to volunteer to come up and present those slides. So you won't know what's going to appear until the slide pops up, and then you just need to kind of give a talk. Generally, when we've done it in the past, it's really good. And I think the only tip I've got for it is pick like a theme that you're going to talk about, and then whatever shows up next to you, just then on the fly be kind of like, oh yes. And yes, this is totally why I got into gardening, or whatever. Just run with it and try and force everything into your theme is the best way of doing it, I think. But yeah, so if you want to give the Ignite karaoke talk, then come and find me or make yourself known at the back during the interval, so that we can kind of get that for the end of things. And the other thing I need to tell you about, ask you to do, is at the start of the second half we will have 1-minute pitches. So if you've got an event that you're putting on soon that you think an audience of lovely people such as yourselves would like to come along to, or you've got a project that you'd like to get word out about, and yeah, come and find me in the interval, and then at the start of the second half we'll have 1-minute pitches where we'll just get people up on stage really quickly, just go, I'm doing this thing, it's going to be amazing, this is how you can find out more, thanks, and yeah, run through those. So we'll have some of those at the start of the second half. Right, okay, all of the housekeeping done, on with our first speaker. And first up we have Kate Riley-James, and she's going to be saying what she's doing. She's going to be telling us about what a difference a decade makes and why 2010 was the year to remember. I mean, it's just going to be a talk about the first ever Ignite Liverpool, presumably, but we'll find out.
You're making me go first. Hello, good evening everybody. I'm always waiting for you to press the button. Good. Okay, as Ignite Liverpool celebrates its 10 years of memorable socials such as this one, what better time for a humble journalist such as me to take you back to 2010 on a trip down memory lane and talk about some of the news stories, the headlines, and some of the quirky things that happened 10 years ago from today. So first up, wasn't a big year for monogamy, 2010. Cheryl Cole got the ball rolling and she finally left love cheat Ashley Cole, and sexting became a thing, 10 whole years of sexting. Some of these guys got done for sending some saucy messages to women who weren't their wives, including Vernon Kate, Ronan Keating, and the lovely, how could Mark Owen do that? He was always the cute one. And on research, going back through 2010, it turns out that actually there was barely a week where there wasn't a high-profile breakup in 2010, including Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Sandra Bullock, Jesse James, Kate Winslet, Sam Mendes, and the one that got me, the one that actually made me still feel quite sad now when we watch Comic Relief and that type of thing, was Lenny Henry and Dawn French broke up 10 years ago. Gutting. But it wasn't all failed mediation and divorce. One lucky soul managed to find someone to love his permatan and bootcut wearing ways. It was, of course, media mogul Simon Cowell, who finally put a ring on it, and then a month later he took it back off again. But Prince William had more luck, and he sealed the deal with Kate Middleton 10 years ago, causing a bit of a stir in the news because he used his mum's blue sapphire ring, prompting Primark to jump on the bandwagon and create about 3 million of them so we could all feel like royalty for 5 minutes. Can you believe it's been 10 years since Apple launched the iPads for a meagre 370 quid? Imagine that now. So we did pretty well in 2010. It's also the year that we got Snap Happy and we took more pictures of our dinner, our dogs, our cats, everything from the weather, political memes, buskers on the subway, because life became Instagrammable. And we overshared. Pinterest also launched in 2010, prompting people to steal wooden pallets from skips up and down the country, because apparently we were all going to make it into this fabulous looking furniture that I don't know anybody who's actually managed to do that. But yeah, speaking of living your best life, it was also a wealth of new words and slang terms gained popularity around 2010. We were all chillaxing. How utterly cringy is that now? While Cameron and Clegg had forged a bit of a bromance, or a coalition as they called it, binge-watching box sets became a thing, and First World Probs showed its face, as did unfriending people on Facebook. Farmville also happened, which apparently was really addictive. It wasn't for me, but it did signal the end of anybody having any kind of conversation on a sofa at home anymore. So yeah, the online Facebook gaming thing took off. It was a great year for music. 2010, Lady Gaga stole the limelight in the meat dress, which apparently has been in a museum and now it looks like beef jerky, which is a bit disgusting. And 2010 is also the year that Liverpool's greatest export, the Beatles, made it on to iTunes, proving that all you need is love and the latest iPhone. Glastonbury celebrated its 40th anniversary and the lineup was amazing. U2, Dizzy Rascals, Stevie Wonder, Snoop Dogg, Muse, Faithless were all on the Pyramid stage, and Matt McCardle won X Factor. Nobody's seen him since. On the telebox, we were all raving about Downton Abbey. 10 years ago, Downton Abbey took over our Sunday nights. Boardwalk Empire, The Walking Dead, 10 whole years ago. And at the weekends, we were hitting the big screen watching the likes of Toy Story 3, Alice in Wonderland, Inception, The Social Network, Get Into the Greek, Shutter Island, Black Swan, and the unmissable, the legendary Hot Tub Time Machine. There was a double dip recession in 2008 and we were all a bit skint, but in 2010 Euro Millions upped the price of basically winning 56 million to £2 and we were all a bit gutted, apart from one Gloucestershire white van man who won 56 million And then in October, so I think it was about 2 months later, somebody won 113 million, which was the biggest to date. Sadly, it wasn't a totally successful year for those with a few quid in 2010. It saw Segway boss Jimmy Hazelden fell to his death in North Yorkshire after riding one of his own firm's motorised scooters off a cliff edge. Probably not the nicest of news that year. In other news, Iceland erupted, or rather a volcano in Iceland erupted that nobody could pronounce. Millions of European flights were grounded, which is a bit gutting if you realise that your 2 weeks in Benidorm wasn't ABTA protected. England's World Cup campaign was pretty much a bag of shite and Germany sent Wayne and Frank home in the second round. But by far, the most random, after I set out to research this, the most random and actually pretty scary and terrifying story that happened in 2010 is that of Raoul Moat, or more specifically, former Newcastle, Everton and England footballer Gaza. So I'm sure you'll all remember where you were. Raoul Moat went on this horrendous shooting campaign in Northumberland in July 2010, and his standoff with police had glued to the TV overnight. And so there was only one man who thought he was the one to put an end to this madness. When he turned up in his dressing gown with a cooked chicken and a fishing rod, apparently. I'm sure you all remember it. And then, over in the States, making America great again, a postal worker from Wisconsin was jailed for delivering the post to a law firm bollock naked to try and cheer up the surly receptionist who was there and greeted him every day. A narcissistic goat caused $2,000 worth of damage after seeing its reflection in a strip club window and promptly headbutted it. A poor man tried to sell his soul on eBay. It's only ever happened once, but it didn't meet the reserve because somebody only bid $666 for it, which is a bit scary. And all of this was before Bumble, Tinder and Facebook Messenger, but that will all come next year when Ignite celebrates 11 years of amazing socials. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Kate. And that sounds like you're going to be coming back to give another talk in a year. Excellent. That's cool. We've got one sorted for next year, Neil. Get it booked in now. Right. Our second speaker tonight is actually maybe it's Samantha Jones. She's not spoken before, so it's not all old hands. But Samantha will have an excellent talk to run us through. So if you can welcome her to the stage, she can just tell us about how to become homegrown, how she's become homegrown.
Hi, my name's Samantha Jones. I'm from Anfield, and for the last 10 years I have been working on a number of projects that are about developing the infrastructure of the high street, the housing and social economy. On that journey, I have moved from many iterations of what I've done. I started off as a researcher, an artist, a baker, a board member, and now a brewer. We are just on this little square, just opposite Anfield. This has, over the last 10 years, there's been a managed decline of the area, and a group of local residents came together to try and change what was going on. We've took over the high street, and my special sort of issue around that space was the green space that was getting left and demolished around the area. So we reimagined what we were doing, we imagined the space, and we started to get people involved and to try and see what we could do. During this process, we trained 26 people in horticulture, and something happened. We grew hops. And then everybody's asking, we set up a microbrewery, and we're like, well, I haven't really thought about that. But my nan, who used to live across the road from Liverpool football ground, was an avid home brewer, as well as toffee, slightly controversial. And what he started to do was look at the history of brewing. Fascinating. It was fundamentally started by women. It's been industrialised, and now it's mostly male-orientated, but it started off with women at home brewing. And a lot of that was to do with health. It was to do with sanitising the water. And as you can see, there's actually a broomstick. Now, a lot of that happened. That brought a lot of commerce. And also a little bit of envy. So what happened was eventually women started to become named as witches because they used to wear tall hats. And then the monks took over the brewing. So we decided to sort of, could we be brewers? So we grew hops all around Anfield. We learned to brew, and we were looking at how we could set up a brewery. And we wanted to see what would the local community connect with. And also, we wanted to also look at more of a democratic process about how we work together. So we started to look at the heritage around our area to try and see how we would start to communicate us as brewers. And what happened was we were using the aspects of the area and then come across this particular cornice. And I will Griffith ap Llywelyn, the last Welsh king, left by the Welsh builders as a point of resistance. So we slightly feminised him, slightly fluid in his gender now, and started to create and develop recipes. Things that would become beers with benefits, and a bit of humour in the sense that we thought it was quite a play on that. And we wanted to look at how we could then start to cross-finance our own activities. John Holden, the brewer who set up LFC, is a big sort of, obviously we're on the foot of LFC, but we wanted to also look at what were the other aspects around the football. We're doing an International Women's Day brew with the handyman, and the research into women's history was fascinating in the sense the point of resistance against women in football were in the sort of early 19th century was actually quite stark, to the point where it was banned in 1920 because they were basically more popular than men. 53,000 people turned up to St Helens and Preston, and then after that they banned it. It was like, no, not happening. So we're doing a slightly different take on Holden's Amber Ale, because we basically want to introduce women into that. So it's women and men, and it's about bringing the two different aspects of football together. Over the last 10 years also, what we've developed is social housing, and we're taking over the brewery and social space. So we have basically, with the community, developed that, and we will hand that over to everyone next year. So we would invite you to come join us, support us, get involved in any way you want, and even if you just buy the beer, it's pretty cool.